Chapter 4. The Essence of Ideas. An idea is a thought, and as such an idea can only exist inside the mind and be shared from one mind to another through communication of that idea. Ideas are not measurable forces of the natural world, and therefore ideas are separate from nature in this sense, even if the chemical and electrical brain activity that causes thoughts are part of nature. This also applies to tools we use to communicate ideas, such as language. Linguistics is often considered to be a scientific approach to the study of languages, but in actuality it does not fully utilize the scientific method, as languages are not forces of nature. Actually, linguistics is largely a discipline that utilizes deductive reasoning to study human languages. Mathematics is a form of this too. Mathematics is a tool by which measurement of phenomena can be measured, and this is commonly done by science. Linguistics and mathematics are serious and useful disciplines, but they are not a science in and of themselves. This may surprise you to read, as you may have been taught differently, but what I tell you is objectively the truth. These disciplines do not meet the same standards as other natural science disciplines do. This is a well-known aspect of these disciplines that anyone who is an expert in these fields and is honest will admit when questioned about it. Now, what happens is that many people will make the argument that there should be special exceptions for certain fields so that their favored fields of interest can be pretended to be science. These people will argue that the empirical standards are simply weaker for their favored discipline than in natural sciences, but this is fallacious reasoning. Specifically, it is a special pleading fallacy with no reasonable justification given for why their discipline should be allowed to be considered a science, even if it does not use the scientific method in its entirety. Let me explain. Moral judgments cannot be natural forces because they are ideas we possess. The chemical and electrical patterns in our brain are real, but the information is tied to memory. Ideas are just a sequence of memories we are recalling. This is why there is always some kind of visual image attached to our inner monologues. For example, if I say baseball, you probably pictured something at least related to the game of baseball. But what you pictured in your mind is going to be different than what someone else pictures due to the differences in the memories you have that other people do not possess. It could be a real memory or an imagined one. A lot of information we absorb from the written word is stored as an imagined memory versus a real experience we had. So we communicate ideas to each other, but when we do so, it is not a perfect match of our idea which the other person receives, because we are not literally transferring data from and into each other's brains. Rather, the other person has to be able to draw on some memory in order to understand what we are communicating. What we call communication is actually interpretation. Our brains have to process what other people communicate to us, and if we have no prior experience with some of the words or phrases a person is using, we cannot understand them, forcing us to create new memories we can use to recall in the future when we encounter those words or phrases again. This is also why it is so difficult for neuroscientists to identify patterns of thought, because the brain is highly malleable. One person's patterns for thinking about baseball are not going to perfectly match another person's. This is because each individual's stored memories related to baseball are different than another person's, and also because of the subtle differences in how an individual's brain developed as they were exposed to ideas or other genetic factors. Autism, as an example. As ideas are associated with memories which a person possesses, this creates variance between how that person remembers the idea and how another person does. It also impacts other important qualities of the idea each individual has, such as how they feel emotionally about that idea. These variances impact how others communicate the idea and how they can utilize that idea. Most human communication is an effort to mold an idea that we have to be as similar in another person's mind as the version of that idea we hold within our own mind. This is an aspect of communication that many people take for granted. For those who question the validity of what I am teaching, consider how people can have different interpretations for songs that are different from what the author of that song intended the song to communicate, and other kinds of media such as books, art, and so on. All of these things can be interpreted by others with wide variance, and this is commonplace among humans. So ideas are not consistent natural forces of the universe. Ideas are a tool that humans use as part of our imaginations to help us communicate and navigate the world. By contrast, natural forces of the universe like gravity and light are consistent in their measurements. They are not subject to us and work the way they work every time in a situation. Whether you know what gravity is or not, you are bound to it. So in this sense, ideas are not part of reality. The mediums which we use to communicate ideas are part of reality. Chemicals and electricity in the brain, sound and speech, etc. but the information we are recalling does not exist. It's just a pattern our brain created and is interpreting. This is also why metaphysical nonsense such as laws of attraction are silly. Ideas cannot be magically beamed out of our brains into the universe to cause changes. Although an idea is a construct of the mind of an organism, it is not a thing that exists independent of the organism, and ideas are so fluid they can be developed and forgotten to the degree the organism no longer remembers it ever once held that idea in its mind. Consequently, ideas should never be considered part of the natural world, but rather a function of the organisms which are part of nature. Humans are one of these organisms. Ideas are not consistent forces of nature, although they can aid us in understanding nature. It is this statement that requires us to explore the difference between facts and factoids. A fact is something that is objectively true and based on evidence. A factoid is an assumption or speculation that is reported and repeated so often that it becomes mistakenly accepted as fact. Note the difference here. A fact is based on observations that have been verified many times. A factoid is a statement based on an assumption, something that has never been confirmed. A fact is not an idea, but a factoid is a kind of idea that people often mistake for a fact. As an example, the idea that humans descended from monkeys is a factoid. Modern-day humans actually have a common ancestor with chimpanzees and bonobos, but this shared ancestor lived approximately 5 to 8 million years ago, long before monkeys evolved. Humans as a species are very distant cousins to other primates, and the families of our species branched off millions of years ago. We went into different evolutionary directions. Factoids lead to significant misunderstandings about the universe because many people do not question their validity. In the above example, the mistaken belief that the process of evolution requires humans to descend from monkeys makes it difficult for people to learn about evolution and reject superstitious ideas such as creationism, because it is obvious that humans did not descend from monkeys. When people confuse evolution for the belief that humans descend from monkeys, it makes it difficult for people to learn what evolution actually is. Thus, a factoid is but a popular idea, and it is nothing more than that. It can be examined using critical thinking and weighed against facts gained through scientific inquiry in order to determine if the factoid is of value. Both facts and factoids can be based on observations, but it is only the fact that is an accurate explanation for the observation. A person can have a genuine experience and still form an inaccurate explanation for what they observed, and this inaccurate explanation is a factoid. Now, it is critical to understand that because many ideas are not facts, they are open to interpretation, and many frameworks of morality have different interpretations based on what that framework makes as its highest principle. Many frameworks built on superstitious ideas consequently make their highest principle another superstitious idea, such as that adherents should serve a deity or free their souls from a cycle of reincarnation. Frameworks built on these nonsenses are often created to serve the interests of the originators and their successors, and not the human species itself. Therefore, I believe it is objectively preferred that moral ideas are designed to best serve humanity's long-term interests, rather than fulfill the short-term interests of individual people who may not be concerned with the survival of humanity. This is the best way to ensure an idea we hold does not lead us to make decisions that will bring our species harm. It is also necessary to understand that complex ideas such as right and wrong cannot be shared to non-humans, at least not the non-humans that we know of on this planet. Animals, fish, insects, and plants cannot think critically as humans do, and therefore cannot understand complex ideas like a human can. Therefore, for the purpose of brevity, for the rest of this section, I will treat ideas as the exclusive domain of humans. While it is certain that animals may form very simple ideas, such as a cat determining it is hungry, or a spider deciding to build a web near its prey, it is indisputable that non-human life forms on this planet can neither develop nor receive through communication the complex ideas that humans can have, which require analytical thinking to comprehend. The overwhelming majority of ideas I will discuss in this book are complex ones, so for purposes of brevity it should be understood that henceforth when I say ideas I mean complex ideas. Thus, as complex ideas are mental constructs that exist only in humans, it is natural that we should seek to optimize ideas for the welfare of humanity using objective truths and critical thinking. Ideas should serve humanity. They should not hinder humanity or lead humanity to its own demise. Yet many of our most cherished ideas often lead us astray and prevent us from discovering the most optimal way to think.